I do want to mention that there are copies of today's program on the chairs here up front. If you would want one of those and you don't have one and you'd like one later, let me know and I can be sure to get one for you. So first I'd like to welcome those of you who are watching this online. My name is Dan Fowler. I'm the pastor of the Presbyterian Church of Ashland. This is part of our mental health grant ministry that we're doing. And today we're going to be offering this workshop on anxiety, depression, and aging. We hope that it speaks to you in some way and blesses your community. Joanne Kosta and I started talking at some point, I can't remember when, January, about the possibility of her coming out and doing some presentations on mental health. She just so happens to have family here, which is her main reason for coming out, I think. 50-50? Yeah. Okay. But I'm very excited to have her with us, so please welcome Joanne Kosta.
Let me say that clearly I'm so committed to maintaining a relationship with my daughter, my oldest daughter. She's 3,000 miles away from us now, and that feels terrible to me. But I know that I helped to create a family so that they could have a life. I didn't do it for me. I tried to encourage this particular daughter to, just think about what the world could offer, and then I started kicking myself about I think it was 5-6 years ago. But so this gives me an opportunity to travel and to teach. And I am very committed to both of those. I came from a teaching family. And so it's in my bones. Even though I did not ever study teaching, I studied nursing first and then went back to get an advanced degree at 50. And after I was nearing the end of that, I thought, I don't want to be done. I'm liking this. I loved it. And it was a master's degree at that point. And so you get to study more of what you are really interested in and less of what somebody else is making you learn. And so that was great fun. And so I applied to PhD school thinking in psychology, thinking that maybe I'd like to do research. And I was so offended that I applied to 2 different schools. I was so offended that they did not want me. I thought, you have got to be kidding. Of course, I had to console myself. I know. I had to console myself with the fact that they had about 260 some applicants for each program. It was a large amount, and they could take between 8 and 9. I suspected that they might have looked at my age. Honest to God, I suspected that was true, and that was why I was so offended, because at that point I was 52 years old, and I was at, in my opinion, the prime. I was at a prime, and for being able to learn and being able to produce, and I didn't have children at home anymore. So I started at that point being personally touched by what I want to say. I don't know how to say this in a way that's real sweet and nice, but age discrimination. I was starting to be told that I was a lifelong learner, and I didn't understand that. I thought, well, I've always been a lifelong learner, so what's the deal here? It just felt really weird to me, but I'm getting adjusted. So it's taking me a little bit to adjust and to embrace. So that's why I named this, Finding Our Way Through Anxiety, Depression, and Life's Challenges. Now, in reality, we have always been finding our way through anxiety, depression, and life's challenges. But what we are noticing, I think some of us more and more, is that there's something that's called aging, and I hear the people that are late 20s start to groan about their aging. And I have to try very hard to be sympathetic and not roll my eyes, because that doesn't make friends. And so, but yeah, aging occurs, and this is what I learned that made a huge difference in my life, and I don't know if I could find this resource again to be able to actually quote it and say, thank you so much, is that For every decade after the decade of 20, we lose some of our ability to process and retain information. So, but what we gain is wisdom, the ability to learn, the ability to pull the threads together and make the picture make sense so much faster. When I was in graduate school, I don't even think I had any doubt in my mind that I could do it, but I realized it even more when I was with quite a few younger people in their 20s and 30s, and I realized, oh my gosh, I may not have near the brain power they have, but I've got life, and that was wonderful. So embracing the each year that goes by, embracing each decade that goes by, and trying not to be too negative or too angry about the losses. That's the goal. And if you could go to the next slide. Uh-oh. So I think I just want to break it down and keep it as simple as possible. So first slide is, what am I talking about here? I'm talking about anxiety. I'm talking about depression. I'm talking about the challenges of life. I'm talking about finding peace in whatever the challenges of life that we have right now, and then the reality of aging. Now, some of you have chosen to come because you, in general, really, you don't care about the aging part at all. You want to know about what's the deal with anxiety and depression, and you want to understand it better. So I hope that you're not disappointed. I will do the very best that I can to fit that in. I've been asked to give a 45-minute presentation. Yesterday, I had so much information that I wanted to share on addiction and codependency that it went longer, and I kind of knew it would. But that is very complex. It doesn't feel as complex to me. So let's see what we can do. So let's talk about anxiety first. Next slide, please. Happy day. It's all right. I don't know. I'm anxious about technology now. No. I can talk about the homily for a minute. I was really impressed. Oh, it's back. I don't get to talk about the homily? I was really impressed because we are all in this together, and what friends that man had that lowered him, that were so committed. We will do this. We're one of you. I loved it. It was a great story. Okay, so at worst, anxiety is so much worry and concern that it takes all of the other values of my life and pushes them aside. Okay? It's real. It's obsessive thoughts, and it's a body reaction. So the body reaction at worst is palpitations and panic attacks and phobias, and that's at worst, okay? It doesn't allow you to have a quality of life. At best, we're going to have it because it's your brain, your body, your spirit's way of adjusting to something new, to something different, to something we hadn't thought of before. So anxiety is actually very normal. Probably the people that don't have any anxiety, they might not be doing very much. If they have, or they might not be aware of themselves very much. They might just be fine all the time, but they don't really necessarily look at what happens to their hands when they are in new environments, or what happens to their heart when they're doing something they're not very good of, or how many times do they say no because they don't think they'll be able to do it well or right or something like that. So if we're out there and we're living and we're pushing the limits a little bit, we will have anxiety. That's part of life. And it comes out in little ones because they scream and holler and they look for security. We want something. We want something that makes us feel better. We want mom to pick us up right now, and if we don't, we're going to let you know. That's, I hate to call it anxiety because they're just being normal. So we're just being normal. So we have to learn coping skills, and coping skills says that when I feel that feeling of this isn't how I hoped it would be, this isn't how I wanted it to be, that we know what we can do to kind of bring ourselves back to center. Okay? So, but it can grow. And if I persist in repeating over and over the same negative train of thought in my head, I can't do this, I'm not going to blank, this is too much for me, or somebody did this to me, I'm a victim. If we continue to repeat those beliefs or those thoughts, our anxiety will actually grow. Have you heard the phrase that say, whatever you feed grows? So if you want things in your life that are more manageable, then make sure that you feed your brain, your thought patterns, with the thoughts and the beliefs that support that. And some of us have been groomed, have been trained to think negatively, to think about, don't do this, be careful of that, watch out for that. So we might have to retrain ourselves, and there's not one thing wrong with that. People do the best they can when we're raising our children. And so in reality, if that parent had anxiety, it's a real good chance that there will be at least one child or more that has anxiety. Now, this lady here, Carol, and I were talking, and we were just talking in general about how to leave go of thoughts of anxiety or of problems or of things that either cause a depressed mood or cause anxiousness. And I've been thinking a lot about it too. And in my practice, I really have a problem with being ineffective. I'm so competitive that if I have a chance, I want to get it done. Let's go. I don't want you to say, oh yeah, I did therapy for about 6 months. And, I want people to be empowered so that they can then land more on their feet and know what to do. So I kept asking myself, I know that one of the best things for anxiety is to have exposure to the thing that sets you off. What? I already feel bad. So I'm going to go and I'm going to ride a ferry over to Kelly's Island, and I'm going to touch snakes. I'm going to hold my hands out and let someone put something like that in my hands. I'm going to think about putting my hands under the rocks and pulling out something like that so that somebody can tag it, not because I care, but because I wanted to get better from what I thought was a very big phobia, anxiety about snakes, and I did not want to have that because I was so embarrassed that my husband had a great property in his mind that he wanted to buy when we were young and starting out, and it was one that he grew up in, not in that house, but his Aunt Jo lived in that house, and it was right by a creek, and it was just a tiny little shack that would have been a good place, to raise a family. And I thought, oh, it's great, I love it, and I was really happy until I heard something about the creek and snakes and the bank, and I said, oh yeah, I don't think I want that house. And isn't that a shame? See, I let anxiety rule my decision. I didn't say that they were dangerous snakes. They were just things that wiggle, and I didn't like them. So that was it. Boom, done. I never really told him that that's why I didn't want that house. I was embarrassed. So anxiety is absolutely something that will make your decisions for you. And the more you feed it, the bigger it grows. So if you can ignore anxiety and say to anxiety, I will take you along. I'm not crazy about you, but I'm going to live. I'm going to go and I'm going to do something that's important to me. Or I'm going to, consider something that normally would make me feel jittery. But I'm willing to take you along. And so I think of it like one of those scooters that people scoot around their cars and try to fix things. You know what I'm talking about? And I say, you sit on that thing, and I'm going to go ahead and tie you to my belt because I'm not even going to take either one of my hands to hold on to you, anxiety. You don't really belong in my life. I get it that you have to be there. But I'm going to just ignore you. And yes, that's what you'll do. So I imagine myself saying, okay, let's go. Let's go. So ask me on a scale of 1 to 10, how high my anxiety has been over the course of the last 2 weeks in anticipation of this wonderful event. How high? Oh, yeah, 7 to 8 for sure. And it'd been higher if I don't have a really nice ability to pray. See, I can put something good in. So back to Carol. So we were talking, and how do you get rid of? Well, first of all, you don't feed it, okay? So, you're on your own anxiety. I'm not going to pay a lot of attention to you. I'm not going to listen to your temper tantrums, but I will pay attention enough to bring you along. And so you don't feed it. And then the second really important thing to do in the reservoir of our lives is to notice, oh, wow, what's in my life? Is it anxiety? Is it joy? Is it adventure? Is it engagement? Do I like what I have in my life? If I like it, I've got no problem. Just put more of that in. But if I don't really like it sometime, if there's more anxiety in my life than I like, then I might want to do something about it. Now, I might grab a hold of some of that anxiety and want to throw it out. You don't belong. I might even hurt myself in the process because I rip a hole in the side of my reservoir, getting so mad about it, resisting it so much. But see, resistance is also a form of attachment. When I'm playing tug of war, and when I'm not letting you pull me over, I still have the rope. So just remember that even the things that we resist is a form of attachment. So what I would really be more effective, yes, sir? Does anxiety want to help us? That's a beautiful question. Does anxiety want to help us? Is it there to benefit us? I think it has its benefit. Absolutely. It says, you might want to watch out because that box tower that you have right beside that has all these things in it, you're working at a factory, and your job is to pick this thing up and move with it. If you look at that, anxiety is about what might happen. What if? What if? Well, when I'm looking at, 1,000 pounds in these boxes, and I know that I pick it up with the forklift, if I don't have any anxiety at all, I might do something stupid, like just let's go pick it up and let it fall over and hurt some people. So in that context, you're absolutely correct that it is helpful. And but when it's not helpful is when it says to me, oh, you can't drive a skid loader. What's that thing called? Forklift. You can't drive that because you don't know how and because things might fall down. Anxiety is all about what ifs. Fear is about what has happened that's difficult and that's, if I put my finger over the hot stove, over the gas stove, it's not anxiety that says it might burn me. It would be wise if I had some fear that said, hello, that's going to hurt that little child or something like that because that's a known thing that's a threat to you. Anxiety is when I start fearing that it might be a threat, might be a threat. And I even make it up in my brain sometimes. So if I want less of that unhelpful anxiety, then I would push some things in. And I don't know, some of you maybe are, I would say probably definitely are more versed in the mathematics of how this works or the physics of how this works. But I have a reservoir and I'm full of anxiety. If I want less anxiety, I'm not going to be that effective in just pulling it out because it just gives more room for growth for the inside. You got it. And so I really want to put some things in that I really want. And then the pressure alone pushes the anxiety out. So I confront the anxiety, but I don't confront it like resistance. I confront it like, look, I own my life, and you have the opportunity to keep moving. I still always have a reservoir for it, and I think that's fine. It's just a sign that you're alive. Good news, huh? Okay, other thoughts or questions before I move on? Okay. We have helplessness. It's normal to not be able to control everything. We feel out of control. We're out of our comfort zone. I can get overwhelmed. All of us can get overwhelmed if we're really trying to live to our fullest. I can think about, I think something bad like that could happen. I think truthfully, I might have thought to myself, if I'd had more brains in my head at the time, I might have thought, don't send your child out to the West when she's in high school. She might like it. That would have been anxiety. Okay? I didn't think about that. I was just so excited for her to learn more about the world. So we have challenges. We have new things. We might feel loneliness because the things or the people that we were attached to, like in my case, my daughter, very attached to her. Didn't mind stepping aside so she could continue to build her life. But I never knew that this would be so hard. So loneliness, uncertainty and doubt, abandonment, being alone as more and more. My husband and I are talking about, we're at the age now where some of our social life is going to come from funeral homes. We have more people that we're losing and that we didn't expect that. So see, there's the unexpected. Oh, and so we have to decide how we want to manage our own health. And do we want to live out of the anxiety of, this might be, or do we want to be prudent and take care of ourselves, our bodies, our minds, but not worry about all the things? Because there is no way they're going to be able to control it all. Next slide, please. So depression is, again, I don't say depression is normal, but having depressed mood is very normal. So we can expect that in our lives, periods of sadness, disappointment, loss, being alone, feeling like no matter what I do, it's not working out. We have times like that. That's normal living. Again, overwhelmed, shocked, out of control. Do you see how two of these? And so sometimes depression people can think they're depressed when they might be actually just really exhausted from all their anxiety. So don't miss that. Yes, sir.
I was told by the Department of Motor Vehicles that I was depressed,
Okay.
so I couldn't drive the car.
Wow. That's disappointing.
Very disappointing.
Yeah. That's a huge loss. I know my dad had trouble with his eyes. You did? You went to a different county? Oh, good. Yeah. So there was a reason why that motor vehicles department said that. They may or may not have been correct. That's another thing that can really contribute as a person ages. Anytime that people stand in our lives and start making big statements about our lives. Oh, you're this, and oh, you have that. And so, no one likes to be controlled. And yet at times, maybe, especially as we're aging, we do need assistance. I used to tell my kids, I'm going to raise you right so that when you're old, when I'm old, I'll do what you say. I don't think I'm old enough. So I do want to be open because I do not want to create more anxiety by being in constant resistance against what they believe out of the goodness of their hearts. So anyways, my dad losing his license was the thing that he could not adjust to, honest. And this man adjusted. But I think he needed to get mad about a lot of things that he didn't like. He would complain, but he would laugh and complain about, how long it took him to get dressed and, how his legs kind of felt weird. And, he always talked about those things, but he never really got mad about it. He got mad about the fact that his license was taken away from him. I was one of the people that drove that because my dad was frightening to drive with. He did not have the insight to see it, but I didn't like it. I stopped driving with my mother quite a few years earlier too, because this woman, to her, if she couldn't see it, she just drove faster. I was like, wow. I don't know. I think you're always a little nervous when you're in the passenger seat. So, whatever. But my dad couldn't see. And my mother said that there was a truck coming toward them, blaring the horn. And my dad got mad because he's like, what's he getting so, about? And I thought, and then I thought about my responsibility with our responsibility with other people and their families. So I think that driver's license thing is huge. And it takes a tremendous amount of insight and humility to say, am I as good at this as I used to be? Well, and again, another story about License Bureau, my dad couldn't pass his driver's test. But they said, why don't you go and rest a little bit and then come back and we'll try it again. That kind of looks like don't you think that looks like a, and I thought, you got to be kidding me. So, yeah, it wasn't pretty. He did not forgive me. I'm sure he has now because he's a good man. And I was doing the best I could at the time. And as caregivers, we really are doing the best that we can. And as people that are aging, we're doing the best that we can. And so we don't need to get into a whole lot of judgment about any of that. Sometimes when I feel depressed, I'm just plain exhausted or out of gas. Sometimes I'm sick of trying. Sometimes I become resentful, which is the next step up the anger ladder. And I get angry about something that didn't go well, that I felt sad about, or that I felt left down or betrayed or abandoned or whatever. So I develop some anger so that I can survive. Does that make sense? And resentment is when I tell the same story over and over, and I build kind of this story about what happened. And bitterness is I build it yet more, and I build a wall around myself. So the very top of that is really true clinical depression, where I have been so walled off with my anger, so isolated, so self-protecting, now that I have lost all interest in what I used to be interested in. I am no longer, don't find hope. I don't have confidence. What else do we experience with depression? Sad mood, whether it's expressed in tears or not, but a sad mood. I think one of the biggest things is losing an interest in things that used to interest me. Now I might just be done with that. I don't want to put together, cars anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. And that's very different. This is, I just can't get into it. I don't have the energy. I've lost my concentration. Those are all symptoms of depression. So there's depressed mood that's normal. And then depression is when I'm starting to have symptoms where I'm actually giving up part of my life, a little bit at a time. Bitterness, emptiness, I feel lost, I feel hopeless, and it is very serious when people feel hopeless because they cannot find at that point any stability, any motivation to hang on through yet one more hard day, one more difficult moment, and it is very, very difficult. And yes, it does have physical symptoms. Like anxiety has physical symptoms, so does depression. I had a period of depression in my life, and the best way that I can describe it is I felt like throwing up all the time. Now, I don't hear other people say that, but they feel exhausted, they have muscle pains, but it's definitely a physical illness, and it is a brain illness. And so it is possible that someone really can benefit from some medications to help their synapses, their nerves, to connect better, something that helps give some serotonin or helps the serotonin to stay in there a little bit longer. It's not a happy pill. It's something that helps the brain to work better, and I really recommend it. And and what we know is that with older people, that with any medicine, it's possible that a much lesser dose is necessary. So starting out low and kind of playing with it. It's not an exact science, medicine. And back to anxiety for just a minute. I highly discourage anyone from using chronically what we call the benzodiazepines, which are the warm blanket of medicine that kind of goes over me and says, oh, yes, I'm good. That is not a cure. That is just a very heavy blanket that is very, it feels very nice, but it's highly, highly addictive. So just so you know. Whereas now sometimes they're using what was first discovered as antidepressants to help the brain to make that jump from one nerve ending to another, and it can be very helpful. So I highly encourage anyone of any age to be open to a little bit of medicine and see how it goes if they have depressed mood. Make sense? Okay. They're not used to that. My dad was like, no, I ain't wearing those stockings. Those are for women. And so, if what you've held in your life, I just take a half aspirin. That was my dad. That's okay. So if he would have needed something to help him with what looked like depression, I would have started and it wouldn't be me. I'd be having to talk to the doctor. That's what we're advocates. Do you understand that we're advocates for people? And we're saying, what if will you consider if the family doesn't get involved? So we need our family to be involved. We need our family to know what it is that our values are so that they can advocate for us. Because like it or not, sometimes there is that discrimination. And especially if we get real mad, right? If we get real mad and have a big fit and start yelling and screaming and names and resistance to the point, well, then that just works out fine for the people that are discriminated against us, because then they go like, oh yeah, well, she's just. So it's real hard. We got to keep it together. Yes, sir.
Could a person be angry if they're depressed?
Yes, thank you for asking that. I think sometimes that's one of the number one symptoms of depression. Now, we miss it a lot because we're attributing it to something else. But being irritable, being angry is absolutely something that I'm always looking at. Whether you're younger or older, it doesn't matter what age. I love the question. Thank you. Any others? Okay, let's go on. So back to, when is it a problem? It's a problem when I really can't have a stable life that I really would have wanted to have. Now, I understand that I have to adjust as my life goes on. So if you consider stable as being, I want it to be the way it looked when it was 30, I don't know. But stability to me is that ability to have those sea legs and the ability to keep adjusting and to keep having a vision of who I am as a person. I want to be able to find meaning and purpose. If I can't find meaning and purpose beyond managing my symptoms all day long, that's a problem. And it's very treatable. It's treatable sometimes with medicine, sometimes with counseling. If you can't do that, then at least the family members and the friends can at least learn how to listen very well and learn about some of the techniques of encouragement. But sometimes you do need professional intervention, and I think it's a good idea. And I tell people that are older, I used to work in a nursing home, actually. I had a pretty big caseload, and I thought, why would you not be depressed? This is hard. This is not easy. And so when I had met with people and they were doing their anger thing, people would refer clients to me, and I got it. It's hard. You're not the one that's cooking your lunch. It's not easy. So the only thing I could say to them is, look, my guess is that in your life, you have worked very, very hard. And so this is just one more time in your life that it's not easy and that you're going to have to work with this. But I thought it was grand that a nursing home would actually hire somebody who is a counselor to be with people in their real lives. We did painting, we did things. So again, if I can't make it stop, what could I put in so that it's pushed out the other side? And thank you. Everybody should just cheer for Carol, because I don't think if Carol would have asked me that question at the beginning of the talk, I would have ever thought to do it. That concept of we have a reservoir, and if you want something to be different, you need to put something good in so that that other stuff can find its way out. Thank you, Carol. All right. When it won't let me live fully as me, when I can't adjust to what is, because life is full of adjustments. I had no idea, I don't think, how much life changed until my children were probably almost grown. So I never really taught them. Oh yeah, just in case you needed to know, life changes all the time. And I did, but we have to change. We have to change all the time. When it keeps me from connecting with people or things that I care about, when I can't find perspective, when I can't step back and see. when I can't find things to be grateful or happy about, when I'm just too invested in negativity or fear. I think that's right there. We don't have to have a diagnostic label if you ask those questions. And you say, how are you doing? How's life? Are you continuing to roll? Next slide, please. So life's challenges will continue. Big mistakes and small mistakes. Some of them affect me in very big ways. Some of them affect me in small ways. Some of them are my mistakes, and some of them are other people's mistakes. That's real. We need to expect it. There's times when I truly will fail. Others will fail. I try when I'm a human being, and I get tired. And in systems, medical systems, educational systems, housing systems, these can be very disappointing at times. So these are the challenges that we have to be able to continue to work with. Sometimes I make poor choices. Sometimes the people that I care about make what I think are poor choices. A poor choice is just simply something that gives you a negative result when you really didn't want it. That would be a poor choice. Or that gives you a negative result a little bit later. In the beginning, it seems like a real positive choice. That's a good one. And then over time, I see, oh, that might have been a poor choice. All right. A diversity of perspectives. There is. People do not think alike. And so that's a challenge because we want people to get who I am. And they don't sometimes. It's just real. My mother had an unrealistic belief in magic. By that I mean she just thought she could always find something to make it better. So she would grab in her bag and she would offer this or offer that, a cookie or a distraction of some sort. And that was one of the beautiful things that she did when she was parenting. But it did appear that she thought that life was a bit magical. And I can't say exactly more than that, except that she really thought that life would poof and that it shouldn't be this hard. And I'm like, why did you think that? I don't know. It's always been hard. It is hard. It's also beautiful. It's also times of easiness. Lack of emotional maturity. I haven't grown up very well sometimes. I still expect that I'll be able to have a fit and get my own way, or that I should expect to have everything that everybody else has, or, the illusion of control, that I can control it all, and maybe my resiliency skills aren't very good. So that's another reason I went to Kelly's Island and put my hand out so they could put a snake in it, because I wanted to show myself, I wanted to grow in my resiliency skills. I actually can cope with high levels of anxiety. I can do this. I don't have to jump in the water. I don't have to get on the first boat home. I could. I felt like it, but I am resilient. So I was trying to grow those. Losses and gains, not being sure what to do or how to cope with it. Traumas. Traumas are really, really difficult things that we hope won't happen in our lives. The small T's are, they're scary, they're bad, they're not good, but they're not something that's going to haunt us. The big T's, the really bad things that have happened to some people, those are real. Some people experience those through no fault of their own. So those are some of life's challenges. That's part of what it is to be human. Real fears, created anxieties, and I love that story about Jesus saw them all walking away, because they thought his message was too hard, and he said to Peter, "Are you leaving too?" And Peter said, "Well, to whom should we go? Where would we go? What better idea do you have, Jesus?" And Jesus said, "No, I don't have a better idea. This is a good one." So I love that. I just thought I'd throw that in. Yes, please. So coming to peace, that's our next section. So how do I get adjusted? How do I come to peace? Well, this is a drawing that I use with a little bit more when I'm talking about attachments, okay? That I don't know what number that is. Let's see. You'll find it. Anyways, this attachment thing is that we will, as human beings, attach to something, guaranteed, because we are not made to be isolated creatures. We're made to be creatures that reach out and attach to people or attached to events, but somehow we're engaged people. That's how we were designed, okay? So theoretically, we would attach to things that would be extremely helpful to us. Now, me and the really big deal. Now, I knew that we were asking different members from the community to come. And the last thing I would want would be for people to say, oh yeah, I went to that program and she was so religious. And so I didn't want to sound too religious. So I really, frankly, don't care where people find their meaning and hope, although I do love the fact that we've got, the possibility of a higher power, a God in our lives. So when I say the really big deal, I'm talking about basically God. So my relationship with God is a primary attachment. If I'm at all open to what that looks like, perhaps I could even grow with that at any age. So I have a committed love relationship between me and the really big deal. Me and God, committed love. And God is in, always in, and I'm try to be in too, because why would I pull away? Through that, God doesn't need to worry about being humble because God's already got everything. So this is mostly about what I need. I need to be humble. Face life with humility, which means that I am not God. Imagine that. I am not the biggest deal of all. So I face life with humility. What's wonderful about me and what's like, ugh. Okay, that's what humility is. Gifts and sacrifices. What will I give to keep this relationship, to grow in this relationship? What will I do? A relationship, for it to be healthy, must be safe. And so I ask myself, and I'm going to give you the list of things that I use in my office to describe safety. Physical, emotional, verbal safety. Has to be safe. If I'm in a relationship that doesn't feel safe in those ways, then I better take a look at it. That's a lot of reason why people have broken off their relationship with God, is because they're attributing mean God things, which isn't, in my opinion, true at all. It's a very narrow way to look. Go ahead. The really big deal. See it up there above the thing? And when I say the really big deal, I'm talking about God. That's who that is for me. Now, you could call it the universe, or you could call it all of creation, or you can call it the good in life, but it's a big deal. It's bigger than you. Okay, so safety, safe from financial. Now, again, when we're in a relationship with God, these words don't make a lot of sense. But I do this when I work with couples. Get it? And so financial, sexual, environmental. Who or what are you bringing into our lives? So the second thing right there is be yourself. I must be myself. I must be. God will be God in this case. I must be me. I must be the best version of me that I can be. It might, and that will generate a little anxiety right there, right? For me to be me should scare us just a little bit, because like, woo, there's nobody else like me. Who am I going to follow? And then if I'm really fortunate, I'll be inspired. I know what's mine and I know what's not. That's peace. A competing attachment is something that gets in the way of my primary attachment, my primary committed love attachment. Okay?
That right there, I know what's mine and what's not, with a relationship that's they can't describe how important that is.
Okay. He said in a relationship, it is so important to know what's mine and what's not. And by that, do you mean like if somebody's grumpy, that you weren't necessarily the one to cause it? Yeah. And to show respect for each other? Absolutely. Very good.
Or to have your mate say, oh, you should do it this way.
Correct. Correct. These are two adults in a relationship, two adults, and I can't suppose that I know exactly how you should be running your life. So I have got to take full responsibility for my life. Next slide, please. Coming to piece number 2, my human being with my human doing. So this is another primary relationship that I need to really take a look at. So my human being looks inside of me for my hopes and my dreams, my potential, my vision, my abilities, my limitations. Who is that human being? And sometimes in the relationship with ourselves, we get so busy doing that we have no idea who I am. And that makes me weaken because I have no sense of self. So I won't have resiliency because I'm trying to do it like somebody else. So just to be always encouraged to understand that I do many things, but I am a person. I am a human being. So to continue to develop that all through our lifespan. And see, sometimes people have worked so hard in their middle years, they're early in their middle years, to do things because they needed to and because that's what their work was. And so sometimes they enter into their older years not having a clear sense of who they are and not being able to do. So wow, that can be pretty shaking. It's all right. You can figure that out as you go. It's never too late to address that human being. I just want to give you one sobering thought, and that is the highest risk for people, and I even hate to say it because it's so painful, the highest risk of people who complete suicide are men over the ages of 65. So come on, let's take care of yourselves. Let's take care of the men that we love. Let's take care of all of us. Okay, so again, the competing attachments are the things that I get so busy with that I can't attend to the relationship. Next slide, please. Okay, and then me and others, same thing. I have to have boundaries. I have to know what's mine and what's not. The same things there, the competing attachments. Oh, I'm too busy. I don't want to be involved in other people's lives. I think you're hearing the call to mission. You heard it this morning as you were called to, how can we not be paralyzed? How can we have the life that we had? What were they called? Painted ladies. The painted ladies have 2 weeks. How are you going to live, ladies? Let's go. Those are the butterflies, just saying. In case you didn't come and know what the painted ladies are. All right, go ahead. So embracing the realities of aging, and with some of you at least, I don't need to tell you because you are and have lived some of it, but physical changes, emotional stresses and strains, it's not less, it's probably more. Spiritual questions, relationship challenges and difficulties, things that I expect, but I didn't really know what it would feel like. Things that I didn't expect, loss of control, things that are hard, things that are so pleasant, you think, surely this must be good. Sometimes the sadness, yes, sir? Boy, you name it. Oh my God, that's the top of the list. Because I have gotten comfortable. Even if I didn't really like that person that well or they caused me a lot of grief, we have bonded, we have had an attachment. So it's such a big deal. And to be able to adjust to that, and so all the more reason to really connect with other people and work together so that somehow we get through this huge moment. Gains, things that I took on that I didn't know I was going to have. Oh no, now I got to figure out how I'm going to manage these finances and these children, and I didn't know I was going to be a full-time babysitter and didn't know I had choices, and so there could be gains too that can be stressful. It's easier to detach and pull away because people don't expect you to be quite as involved at times, so it's easier to hide. It might even be a relief to not have to have so much stuff on you. Or it might be really hard to say, ooh, I used to be able to carry 10 things. Why can't I anymore? It can be exhilarating this time in life, but I'm sure very disappointing. And the biggest question of all is, do I matter anymore? Now, if I spent my whole life doing and I can't do. I remember that my grandma lived with us, and she would say, oh, this is just terrible. I can't do anything. I just, what am I worth? What am I worth? I'm just useless. I hated to hear that, but I knew that when my mother handed her a pan of beans that need to be snapped, somehow Grandma felt better. At least she was doing something. When she lectured us about the length of our skirts and told us that our mother should put a ruffle on it, if I could do that, I would do that. That's good, Grandma. Thank you. It was hard. She had a hard time not being able to manage the whole thing. She tried to tell my mother she was wrong for going to work. It was very interesting. Go ahead. So can we do this? Can we adapt? Can we improvise? Can we overcome? Can we make lists and not feel ashamed about it? We could quit. We could even start over. We can ask for help. We can choose to be humble and embrace what's wonderful about us. And don't forget that wisdom age. This is a wisdom age. There is nobody that has wisdom like the older people. Seek the truth. Choose to trust. Make sure you have friends. We've got to have friends, people that get us. It was great. I was at a meeting the other day, and somebody said, my daughter insisted that I have to have a cognitive test. And she said, and the doctor said I came out with flying colors. You could feel the anger. It was very funny. So people that get you, and her people got her. They knew exactly what she was talking about. Be willing to work at life just like you've always worked. Be kind. Accept the truth as you can best see it. Laugh at any chance that you get. Use helpful resources. Denial is not a helpful resource, by the way. To say, it's not happening, you would say, my sweater isn't red. Really? Okay, sure looked red. She's like, no, it's pink. I'm like, oh, well, it's not helpful, because if she wants to put her red sweater in with my white pants, we might have a problem, I'm not sure. So it's not helpful. Choose gratitude, be open to plan B always, and that's at any age. Listen carefully and ask people what it is that they've just said. Did you say this? Was this what you said? Is that what you meant? Is that how you're feeling? Because when we do that, then we can be more clear rather than reacting to what someone said and don't want to be accountable for it, or what they didn't say and we misunderstood. So don't assume. Say what you need and want. Be you. There is nobody else that can be you. So let your beauty continue to shine through. And maybe this is the first time in your life. So if you are a person who's receiving care from physical therapists or from anybody, be there for that person. Be you. Because they're in the time of life when they just about can't cope. And so, yes, you have that same life. It's really hard. But if you can lighten their load for 1 minute, just by saying something kind or sweet or understanding, I think it's a beautiful thing. One more. So I thank you very much for being here, and let's open up for questions or comments. Reverend Dan has the microphone so that the YouTube people can hear you. And it's about time some of you have had a microphone anyways.
I'll be Phil Donahue.
Oh,
And yes, I
love it.
realize I'm aging myself dramatically.
I was
by
just
that.
going to say, people do not know who Phil Donahue is sometimes. Do you know who he married?
So are you saying,
Marlo Thomas.
I think what you really mean is, that's my Phil.
He was excellent.
I actually have a question, and then I'll open it up. I think it's very interesting. You talked about denial, and for me, that is one of the larger issues about depression and anxiety.
It is.
Because it means we admit
I know.
that there's something not right in us.
Right.
And
So we should just admit it right off the bat before
Yeah.
we even have any symptoms.
okay. So then how do you deal with that? And I speak, I know not everybody here is from our church, but I speak from a church perspective in that so often when you come to a congregation, you put on your veneer and everything has to be fine because we're people
Right.
of faith. There's nothing bothering us.
Yeah.
We won't admit to it. And yet the reality is all of us deal with anxiety and depression and issues about aging. So how do you deal with that unwillingness to be honest?
You know, what we don't want to do is get into a tussle. And so we befriend. I remember that I did a retreat, and in this particular retreat, it said, make a friend, be a friend, and bring a friend to Christ. Now, if we want to help someone to feel better, to get better, to deal with their stuff, make a friend. Act like you're a friendly person. Xavier Xavier. Let's see. Xavier is his first name, Xavier. Okay, I'm giving you a name. If you want to write it down, you can. But Xavier Amador, his last name is Amador, says basically, if you want someone to do something about some symptoms that they're having, learn how to connect with them, and I mean really connect with them. And then they might actually do the thing that they need to do, not because they think they need it, but because they love you. And since you're worried about it, my sister who had schizophrenia said, oh, Joanne, I don't have any problems, but if you say that I've got to do this and this, then I guess I will. And I said, thank you, I love you.
Other questions that folks have?
Yes, right.
See if I can get back here. I don't know if it'll reach.
It's probably piggybacking off of what Dan was asking, but I was wondering if you could speak to the issue of shame in depression, because I think for ministers or Christians who are told if we only pray enough, or psychotherapists, and I'm a psychotherapist, for us to admit that we're just human and that we ourselves can have depression or anxiety, we're often covered with shame because of the expectations that we should be above that, we should know more, we should pray more, etc. And I think shame is just a huge issue that is very, very hard to deal with.
I think you're absolutely right. So remember that slide. Can you go back about 3 slides to the one that's me and me, the human being and the human doing? So if I continue to get more and more in touch with the truth about who I am, my strengths and my weaknesses, so that's my first step. Get more and more real with myself. Drop the denial with myself and say, yep, girlfriend, this is how you are.
Jim, next slide. Next one. Forward 1. Nope.
Backward 1. Backward 2 now.
There it is.
Thank you. So get more clear on yourself and admit it and then if you went one more backwards, go ahead and go one more backwards. You get more clear on admitting it, you and God. I can, because I'm loved, because I was created, because I'm a human being, I can start to face myself as a human being. And then I do as much as I can to say, this is how I fail. This is what's wrong with me. And did you notice that there was quite a few times in this presentation I said us? I belong. And so you don't have to feel like I'm standing here talking about you. And so that is one way to decrease the shame, to spread the understanding that, oh no, it's not like you're such an unusual person. You're just a human being. And let me tell you what I did the other day. And I can give you a list of things that I've done where I've fallen, where I have acted dumb, where I said the wrong thing. You know, I'm constantly nervous about what I'm going to be doing wrong. If I share that out loud and let other people know that, then maybe when they say the wrong thing or when they're afraid to stand out in a crowd, they're not going to be as nervous because they feel like, well, she gets me if nothing else. That would be my first suggestion. And so thank you for saying, and I'm a therapist, and I need help too sometimes. I mean, she said something like that. She's like, no, I didn't. Questions? Comments? Yes. Up here in the front.
Hold on. Excuse me, B. Watch your feet. Sorry, we're simulcasting.
It's all good.
So all the way through your presentation, I had this image in my mind. I couldn't get it out of my mind. It came up on every single slide, and it was the image of skiing. And for me, that was the most terrifying and the most exhilarating and the most wonderful and the most horrible thing in my life. I didn't start really skiing until after I retired, so I was in my 60s.
Wow.
And I did a lot of it, but I was never very good.
Yeah.
But every single time, it was terrifying.
Yeah.
And every single time, it was the most wonderful feeling I ever had at the same time.
Yes.
And I kept seeing it on everything you were talking about, that sometimes the thing that's hardest is also the thing that's best.
That's wonderful. Thank you for that insight. That's beautiful insight. And I can tell you that I, not as terrified as I was within the last X amount of days or even the last X amount of hours, but you know, terrified is real, and so is exhilarating, and so is thrilled. Yes, sir.
You're doing a fine job, Phil. There are two things that I'd like to say. One, there's a sociology term called creeping normalcy.
Creeping normalcy.
Which is what happens in a community when you live in that community. You don't see the changes.
There you go.
You don't really realize what's happening. Like, you know, everybody has a cell phone now, but, you know, I grew up before on a party line.
Me too.
And people do this. The other problem is with the major psychoses, it's at least 60%, and probably all of these sort of behavioral issues is probably in the 40 to 50%. People just don't realize they have a
I
problem.
know. That's exactly why we have to follow Xavier Amador's advice. He's got something called LEAP, and I can't remember off the top of my head. It's I think, well, I thought it was in the program from yesterday, but I don't think it is. But okay, this gentleman, did you have a thought? Oh, she's speaking. Good.
Yeah. You know, I have reason to be depressed.
Yes.
Yes. I have a daughter who's schizophrenic. I was interested that your sister is schizophrenic. And she has been, well, she's going to be 60 years old, and she developed this when she was 18, her
Yes.
first year in
Yes.
college. I also have another daughter who has epilepsy.
Yes.
And right now she's been up in Portland at the OHSU, and she's had an implant in her brain. And I have cancer now.
Okay.
So I'm terrified that I'm going to leave them.
Oh,
You know,
yes.
it's just awful.
Yes.
You know, I guess that's saying that they need me too much, but I
Oh,
don't
no,
know
I
where-
don't think it's too much. I think it's okay. And I thank you for your courage in sharing it.
Yeah.
And please do share so that other people can hear your worry and they can say, well, I can do this. I can help with that, because that does help some.
Yeah, and I don't know, their faith in God is non-existent, I think.
There, as you said,
I don't think they have a very strong faith.
I know.
Yeah.
I got it. And that,
Yeah.
for a bit, that terrified me until my, and I was terrified about my other sister, who I'm like, ooh, she's pretty, you know. And so my dear friend said to me, Joanne, our God is so merciful. Don't pretend to know. I said, okay, good. I can relax a little bit. So thank you. I think that the gentleman in the back row wanted in. Oh, you can pass it to him right there.
The question is, what does it feel like to die?
Go ahead.
mean, it could
What do you
be-
think?
It can be put in other words.
No, let's be blunt. So what do you think? Do you have a certain image in your mind? What do you
Well,
think
it
it's going to
could
be?
If I get really sick, it could be relieving.
Oh, of course, I agree.
But even at that, there's got to be a big component of anxiety, depression, everything that these challenges of life.
Yes.
It's going to be there
Yes.
in that one moment.
Probably the process of getting ready to die is the harder part. And that's where we really need a lot of support as we go through those reflections and as we want to address things or not address things. And probably, I'm going to guess that a lot of times the moment that we die or the moments that we're dying, actually in the process of dying, we're probably, for the most part, checking out because it is a transition. I remember being in the house of someone who was dying a couple times. I could not stay awake. It so reminded me, I wanted to write a book in the garden because it felt like I was waiting, and as that person was doing their internal work. I think compassionate care as people are breathing their last breaths, if it's a slower type of thing, it means a great deal. We allowed my mother to express herself and to not be over-medicated, but when it got to the point where I thought, ooh, I don't like Mama suffering that much, I said, okay, let's go. Let's get her some more drugs. Right now, she's done plenty of her work, and we don't need to, like, belabor this thing. Let's just take care of her.
What is relieving to me is it's probably a belief system, but that I believe that life is eternal. I think it's in the Bible.
It is a belief system, and I think if someone doesn't have those belief systems, sometimes it can be perhaps harder. So then I think we pray for them and we support them and we accept them the way they are. Any understanding that I have of a God doesn't, isn't going to say, oh, yeah, isn't going to make it worse. Is going to embrace the children with love. So I'm not going to be able to convince anybody of that, but I can love them.
I
He
just
has a
want
question.
to, I'm going to get to Bill in just a second. Don, I want to mention,
Oh,
I
good.
think death and dying, especially the older we get, that becomes a place of anxiety and depression, definitely.
It might be, but I think what this gentleman has done is he has brought it out into the open. He's put it on the table. And once we can really talk about the truth and, some realities that are scary, they're not as scary. Remember that anxiety when we go, ooh, we can't talk about that because that just makes it grow. So when we start to talk about it and start to be real, it's really helpful. Yes, sir?
There, what you've revealed today is very helpful in our feelings. But our feelings are dependent upon science. And the science, we have not enough yet to determine what causes depression, what causes anxiety, and what causes people to use drugs.
Well, we actually do know more than we ever have known.
We do.
Yes, we do.
And there are positive amines called acetylcholine that operate our brains and create a balance between the
He got disconnected there. Can you push that in? Thank you. Good.
anyhow there is a science.
Epinephrine, norepinephrine.
Acetylcholine on one side and norepinephrine and epinephrine and the various different serotonin you mentioned,
Sure. Dopamine.
the various different positive amines and negative amines, and there's a balance to our feelings. So at one time we feel good about something, and another time we feel bad about something. And if it irritates or makes us angry or someone, our feelings are dependent upon scientific
Yes. Our feelings
chemicals.
are part
And-
of our brain.
Then synapses do work, and we just have not developed enough information yet to control the human experience for aging, and we get caught in the middle here, where all the negative things, the acetylcholine effects, depress us and cause our anxiety and lead us to blame others and so on and so forth. And so I think the sermon today, just as I am, without one plea, I think, and the committed love, the big deal, and the problems with being human, and all of these things will depend on science. Not that we will live forever, and not that we won't deteriorate, and not that our feelings won't deteriorate to where we feel loss and loss of all sorts of things that you mentioned. All of these things, loss. Do we matter?
We sure do.
Yeah, we do.
Till we take the last breath and beyond.
And so the big deal is committed love, yes, and caring for others, yes, and putting ourselves in a valuable position, yes. Those things are all very important because we don't have the science yet to understand why all these things happen to us as we age.
But if we had the science, and I'm not saying we don't or shouldn't, we'd have to be careful because we might even think that then we can control everything, huh? Just saying. So some of this is being able to adapt to things we cannot change, we cannot control. Thank you for your comment, and I hope you're still active in doing research and doing contributions and in asking questions. Please continue to do that, every single one of you. Thank you.
I just want to mention a couple of things. One, I'm so glad that whoever plays the marimba, I hope they got money for whatever that ringtone is that we're hearing right now. Second,
That's so terrible.
and it's totally fine. Second, I just want to say, I hope that in discussing issues of mental health, that this becomes something that we do and don't feel that we can't do.
No, please.
Especially in this community, especially in this congregation. I still remember when I got here, and someone got up and said, so in a Presbyterian system, you preach in front of a congregation, then they either vote yay or nay. They voted yay, and somebody got up and said, "What are you going to do about mental health?"
Yeah.
And I went, "Gulp, okay." So I hope that we're willing as people of faith and people of this community in Ashland to take the veneer off. And if you're not doing well, say it to somebody. Let them know. Because too often we keep those masks on. And again, as Ann was saying, people in the helping profession, "Oh no, I'm fine. I've never had any problems." That's not true. And I hope you realize that when I preach and I'm struggling, I'm being honest and real with you. But that's an encouragement, is to be honest and real in this community. Don't put on the everything's fine veneer, but tell somebody when you're not. The other thing I want to mention, can you go back to be and do, if you can find it?
Let's see, it's the next one, forward one. Human being and human doing.
Okay, it's a joke. I hope it's funny. I saw this t-shirt, and I use this sometimes when I'm preaching on this issue of how do we define ourselves, by doing or being. Socrates said to be is to do. Plato said to do is to be. Sinatra said doobie-doobie-doo. It's both. As I saw that, I thought I have to sell that. So I want to thank Joanne very much for being here. Let's give thanks for her presentation.
Yes, please do the
I was
evaluations.
going to mention that if you do evaluations, and if you have any other questions you want to ask her, you're welcome to stick around and do that. Thank you all for being here. We hope to do these presentations on occasion. We have a grant, and we want to use it. And so we'll keep doing that. Thank you for coming.
And the other thing is, if somebody says something like, I'm not doing very well, please don't talk them out of it. Echo back, oh, you're not doing very well? Tell me more. Or, you know, is it this? I know your daughter was sick. Is it that? So don't say, oh, yeah, you're going to be okay. You had a comment, sir?
Okay.
My ministry, transparency is really important, and in my ministry, one of the things I tried to do often, all the time, was to be transparent. The danger in that is that transparency can be weaponized against you.
Of course.
And so,
So don't.
part of the listening is giving grace.
Yeah,
And,
for sure.
and providing safety, so that if I or anyone is opening up, that doesn't become a means to hurt them later on.
And if you want to share about yourself with people for a purpose, then don't say anything that you wouldn't be okay if it was put on the radio. Right. So just keep it in mind. If you're talking to your friends, keep in mind that that should be a trusting, safe place. Look for trustworthy people. And if they're not trustworthy and you choose to share out of the generosity of your heart, then don't share more than you can afford. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for coming.